Let's start. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we kind of get started here, just want to make a quick announcement. We are going to move the budget portion of the meeting, if you're following along with the agenda, in front of the executive session, so that anybody interested in staying for that can hear it prior to the executive session. And from there, looks like we're going to start off with the police department.
Thank you. I only have two items to report on. Just an update for the trunk or treat that we had last Friday. I think it was a success. I know I enjoyed myself incredibly. The attendance was higher than I expected. I think it was also a result of a PTO event that was occurring at the same time. I've already reached out to that party and the organizers of the PTO to see if we can continue to coordinate these events in the future, because they complemented each other well. They also agreed. So we had, I'd say probably a few hundred people that attended and came through. Diamonds Federal Credit Union was able to donate the bikes that they had for National Night Out. And we gave those to the best dressed, best costumes. Public Works was also in attendance and did an incredible job, not only getting all the equipment down there, but also slinging hot dogs and popcorn. So Bob did a good job. He was a little slow at first, but he picked it up. I think we went through about his count 216 hot dogs. But his count, right? So again, it was a success. We did see some commissioners down there in the families, which was great. I hope to continue that event into the years to come. Item B on my agenda is Warner Street stop sign. If you can remember, or if you ever saw it, there was an oddly placed stop sign on Warner Street in Cumru Township, just shy of the Moulton jurisdictional line. It was our stop sign originally. It was placed that far back from the intersection, probably about 20 feet back from the intersection, due to the fact there's a garage that sits right there on the corner, East One Missing and Warner Street. And the stop sign, in order to remain at the intersection where it should be placed, was right in the middle of their parking lot, basically. So it was asked to be moved, it was moved back, and along the short of it is that stop sign was removed and put up closer to the intersection, which is now Moulton Borough. So it's no longer our stop sign, which I have some fun with, and it's the responsibility of Moulton. And it's more importantly placed at a location that makes sense. It doesn't confuse me.
We need to adopt, as part of the traffic ordinance that we're assembling for another stop sign on Jefferson and for the no trucks on Mount Penn, we need to add removal of this stop sign from our ordained list of stop signs, now that Moulton has taken the responsibility for that stop onto themselves, which is just fine.
Yeah, and I have a list of different things that we need to amend the traffic ordinance with, so I'll add that to the list.
That's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Gina, do you plan fire station?
Yeah, the question Mr. Donnell asked is, do we need a motion in relation to the stop sign or just nodding heads?
Just nodding heads is fine. It's already in their jurisdiction.
Thank you. In regard to the fire station construction, we've received a pay application number 3 from HB Fraser, which is the electrical contractor, in the amount of $71,280.90. We did receive the signed pay application from the architect. So we're respectfully requesting that the board authorize the release of funds.
Second.
Mr. Bill Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Backdoor,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. As everyone can see, the fire station now has steel and roof trusses up. It's beginning to look like a real building. With the very calm weather that we've had, the crane operator has had ideal weather for doing steel work. The downside of the weather pattern that we're in is that we had to impose a burn ban. Just to clarify, Cumru Township does not have burning like some of the very rural townships in Pennsylvania. Once a municipality becomes a mandated recycling community like we are, burning is not allowed for trash or other things, with very limited exceptions by the DEP. One of them is a minimum of 10 acres of contiguous ownership or control. Another is you can't burn trash. Nobody should be burning plastics or other types of materials that release noxious chemicals into the air. You can't burn to clear land. You can't just say, I want to clear this land over here and light a fire and let it go. You can't do that. It has to be a controlled burn situation. We have permitting for that. And the fire department inspects those burn situations. When somebody applies for a burn permit, they check out, do they have the appropriate acreage and do they have the appropriate safety mechanisms in place? However, Cumru and several other municipalities throughout the region and the state have begun to impose burn bans because of the extended dry weather. And that includes anybody with a burn permit. We have called or left messages for all of the owners who have burn permits. And also it includes something like the backyard fireplace that I have. We're not doing that. The fear is that with the dry leaves, if you have embers that are floating around in the air, the wind picks up all of a sudden, then it could light a fire in a more distant location. So I just wanted to alert everyone to that. It is on the website. I believe there are at least 2 other municipalities in Berks County that have declared burn ban, Ruskin Manor Township and Sinking Spring Borough, I think.
Yeah, Lower Alces has 2 now.
Thank you. That was my PSA.
Hey, here, and for administration.
In regard to, we have 3 ordinances that have been discussed in recent meetings and have been advertised and are now ready for adoption. The first one up is the Consolidated Delinquent Accounts Ordinance. Just to refresh the board's memory, that we had 3 separate ordinances describing how to deal with delinquent accounts in terms of when they can be sent to collections and fees and et cetera. And this is consolidating all of that into one ordinance. So it has been advertised. We're respectfully requesting adoption of that ordinance.
I'll move the vote.
Awesome. Mr. Badger,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. The second ordinance is the non-uniform pension ordinance, adopting a slight change to the way the benefit calculation is made. Instead of the wording 5 years, it's going to be 60 months from the 60 full months from the date of retirement. And that ordinance has been advertised and we're respectfully requesting adoption.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Donnell,
Abstain.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Badger, sorry, Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. The third ordinance is the sewer rate ordinance. As discussed at the recent sewer authority meeting and at recent board of commissioners meetings, it is necessary to increase the sewer rate. We've had the same sewer rate for 3 years. And the reason for that is to enable the accumulation of money that can be transferred into the capital fund in order to continue with capital projects such as replacement of sewer mains for control of infiltration and inflow, and for the Angelica Interceptor Replacement Project. And we're requesting, adoption of that ordinance as well.
So
Just to make sure I'm following this, the public's edification. This is what we talked about last budget meeting about, this is for the expenses incurred in this calendar year to cover those expenses, not for the budget year, for the fiscal 2025.
To clarify, this would go into effect for the November billing.
Right.
We would make a transfer before the end of the year to the capital account of $500,000, but this rate would continue into the future. It would not discontinue in the new year. So I believe Mr. Bill Miller had made a motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Bill Miller,
yes,
Mr. Bador,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
yes.
Thank you. The next item is, with a great deal of feeling, I'm happy on her behalf, not happy on my behalf, recommend to the board to accept a letter of retirement from Peggy A. Carpenter, who will be retiring after 3+ decades of service on January 31st, 2025. For the public's edification, Peggy is the financial guru of the township and has the best collection of sunglasses I've ever seen. Yeah, otherwise known as Hollywood Peg. So I'm respectfully recommending to the board to accept her letter of retirement.
I move to accept. We're happy.
Thank you.
Also,
They were thinking about it. They weren't going to accept your retirement.
I was wondering if we said no, then she has to keep working. Is that the way it works?
Mr. Bador,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. The last item is another announcement. No motion is necessary. As I previously discussed with the board, we have other pending retirements in the administrative department. So we are now advertising, the advertisement started today for an administrative assistant class 3. And we're accepting applications up to close of business the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, if anyone wishes to apply.
Moving back to D. This might be out of, hope this isn't improper, but similar to how we commended the outgoing commissioners at the reformation of the township board. I think someone who's given 3+ decades of their life and hard work for the township more than deserves a small token of recognition. So I would move to recognize Beck for, in the same way, a similar way, plaque, a letter of gratitude for her service to the township.
Is a motion necessary? You would concur, Dave?
In a second.
I
It was
will take,
necessary. Sure.
Mr. Bill Miller? They made a motion?
Yes.
Mr. Bador?
Yes.
Mr. Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I agree, and I'm sure we will come up with some creative ways to recognize Peggy's retirement.
That's right. How about a real good roast?
We can bronze some of her sunglasses.
Somebody up here just knows you all too well.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob, you're up for public works.
I'm gonna unfortunately throw it back to Gene to talk more about the LSA grant, for the, interceptor project.
There is a second round of LSA grants. This one is statewide. Well, we plan on applying for a portion of the Angelica Interceptor replacement project. This grant limit is up to $1 million, so I anticipate that we will be applying for the full $1 million for phase one, which would be the pump station at Harding and Hancock and the associated connection. And so what we're requesting is that the board authorize us to apply with a resolution, and the cap would be the cap of the grant program, which is $1 million.
So moved.
A second.
Mr. Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Badger.
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just an update on Cedar Top Road. We expect the paving to be completed tomorrow on that section from Welsh down to Penland, the Warner Street Bridge. They are even scheduled to come in and line paint tomorrow. I see the road open completely by Friday, so things have been moving on well with that the last couple of days.
I did want to thank all the residents in the area and anyone who uses Cedar Top on a regular basis. It's been a very, very difficult project. And the letters that I had sent out to the residents in the area said that I indicated that this would be a difficult project, and I'm sorry I was correct. But also that road hasn't been reconstructed. I can't tell that section of road, I can't tell you when. And there's a lot of utility action, and there's rock. So it was just a difficult project all the way along, and I want to thank the residents for their tolerance of the situation for so many months.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to Kelsey for the solicitor.
Great, thank you. Just an update on the zoning ordinance text amendment, as well as the subdivision and land development ordinance text amendment, which sort of go hand in hand in this case. The letters were sent to the property owners in mixed use general commercial district dated October 7th, 2024, letting them know about the text amendment. Advertisement for the public hearing scheduled on November 19th. It's scheduled for publication on November 3rd and November 10th of 2024. And recently we did receive a review letter from the Planning Commission's engineer, Steve Hoffman of Great Valley. And that letter was dated October 24th of 2024. We also received a review letter from the Berks County Planning Commission dated October 23rd, 2024. And I think the board received copies of those letters. Candidly, I have not had a chance to go through both letters in depth and in detail. And they are pretty extensive. They offer a lot of insight into some recommendations that the engineer and the Berks County Planning Commission have regarding the changes that we've sort of put forward in the text amendment. And we still haven't received a review letter from the Planning Commission, the Township Planning Commission. And I believe on the 4th, when they meet, we're going to discuss that at length, and they'll issue something after that meeting. My concern is that with the hearing being scheduled for November 19th, I don't believe that there's going to be time to amend the ordinance and figure out how we want to amend the ordinance again, provide it. To deal with some of the issues that have been brought up by the Berks County Planning Commission, the Planning Commission's engineer, and the Planning Commission. So, and I think that this is a sort of a serious issue that should be considered with a lot of thought by the board, instead of rushing into a hearing and having a hearing. One of the rules in the municipality's planning code is that if you have a text amendment and you have the hearing, and then you make substantial changes to the amendment after the hearing, you've got to go through the process again. So what I'd like to avoid is having a hearing and then decide we need to follow some of the recommendations contained in these review letters and then have to have another hearing. So it would be my recommendation at this point to cancel the hearing that has been scheduled, take our time, look at all of the review letters that we've compiled and decide what recommendations we want to take, what we want to take halfway and go from there and sort of get a very solid revision together of that ordinance and then move forward with scheduling the hearing.
Kelsey, did we receive a email with engineer's review? Because I don't have it in the file folder there.
I thought I had put it on the tablets. I can email it directly to all the committee.
Yeah, I don't have what she's referring.
Okay, then,
I just checked the tab.
yeah, then it. I apologize because I actually did that, went through the motions yesterday. Obviously, it didn't stick or it's not in the right place. But I will email all of that to you directly so that you have it.
Has, Gene, I think you said you didn't have a chance to fully review their letters. Has anybody within the township at this point had a chance to at least give us 30,000 foot view of what we're talking about?
Yes, Steve Hoffman, our planning engineer.
I mean, I can give you an overview. I read through it. I mean, there's a lot of suggestions around entertainment that we had, a lot of suggestions on definitions of retreat centers and what should or shouldn't be included, so on and so forth. I mean, my immediate reaction when reading it is somewhat along the lines of what Kelsey was talking about, where like in business, when we get involved in contract negotiations, a lot of times what our lawyer do is effectively sit down, go through all the different suggestions, make a recommendation, and then we can kind of say whether or not we agree with that. I don't know if that's something that Kelsey does or Gene does or who the right person is, but there's so many different definitions, suggestions between the different bodies and a lot of overlap. It's almost like it's a little overwhelming as a non-legal speaker. So maybe somebody could do that. We could talk about it on the 19th and then maybe schedule it for December.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because we are going to get insight from the planning commission too. I mean, they haven't had a chance to give us their insight and that will happen on the 4th. So I think once we have all three, the engineers review, the Berks County Planning Commission's review, and the Township's Planning Commission comments, we can sort of compile them and Gene and I can determine what we think would be changes that we would want to implement, or maybe ones that we would want to stay away with, or maybe we want to blend them. And then we could present sort of a final product to the Board of Commissioners for review. And if everyone's comfortable with it at that point, we could reschedule the hearing.
So the timeline I proposed too aggressive. I mean, could we talk about this in the November meeting and then have the hearing in the December meeting?
There's less than 30 days between those two meetings. That's the problem.
Yeah, we would still want to have to resubmit everything to Berks County Planning Commission and the Township Planning Commission. So I think it's a little aggressive to say December. And again, we want this to be, if we're going to do this text amendment, my advice is let's get it done right the first time. And I think that rushing it is not a good choice. So I would say December is probably a little aggressive, but in the early new year.
Is December a 5-week month?
Yeah.
Is
The meeting is on the 17th. And the November meeting is the 9th.
Yeah, and the 5th Tuesday would be New Year's Tuesday.
We've done that once. We did, back in 1998, we met on New Year's Eve and adopted a budget on New Year's Eve. I do not recommend it.
So what do you think? Like the 9th, November, you would have something to review, or December we have something to review?
I can certainly, well, so we're only going to get the Planning Commission's comments some point after the 4th.
What we would want is for the planning commission to give us their comments on the 4th, and then Patty and I will work it up into a letter or a memo or something of that nature. And then we'll have all three pieces of information that we need. So I think we could present to the board on the 19th of November that here's our recommendation, consolidating all this or looking at all this information.
And then the hearing would be in our January meeting.
Yeah, we could schedule for January 9th.
I'm fine with that if everyone else is.
So moved.
I'll second.
It looks like it'd be January 21st, if I talk.
So I have a motion and a second as far as scheduling for that date, correct, at the 6 and 6:30?
And, I don't know, do we need a separate motion or wrap it up? Do we need to move to cancel the previously advertised meeting, or is this all just one?
No, you already said it by rescheduling it, and we will, we had sent, it wasn't necessarily required to send certain notices out, but we will resend them just to make sure that people understand. So I have a motion and a second. Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Bachelor,
Yes.
Mr. Janelle,
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's all I have for tonight.
Okay, so the public next, did we get a sign up list? We have Keith, Zelaskowski, thank you, I would not have got that on my own.
Hi, everybody, I'm here tonight, because. Oh, okay, I thought I was loud. Okay. I'm Keith Zelkowski, I'm a Cumru Township resident. Here at the invitation of Mr. Batdorf, he had asked me to, come by and just introduce myself. He mentioned that there were going to be 2 openings for, alternates for the zoning and, planning commission. I'd like to throw my hat in the ring for those alternate positions. Have extensive experience in real estate, mortgage, planning, zoning. I've done a number of developments. I've done a number of housing projects. So just a little bit about me. Just wanted to say, hey, just so you know who I was. Do you have any questions?
And for the board's edification, at your last meeting, you filled the alternate positions, but we know there's going to be some movement in January because one of the planning commissioners is retiring, so to speak, from his volunteering job, Mr. Bill Meek. And so there will be a vacancy on the planning commission. So there will be some movement there. So in January, the board will have an opportunity to consider another appointment, whether you wish to move alternates up. There's no rule, by the way, with alternates. You don't have to say, it's not like seniority for a union. You don't have to say the most senior alternate has to go in this spot. That's not a rule. So when we get to that point at your January meeting, you will be making an appointment to fill the planning commission spot, and if you move an alternate in there, you'll be able to backfill an alternate.
You will be. Well, it's taken.
Okay. Let me know.
At the last meeting, we talked about potentially getting the resignation of Mr. Meek, I believe he said it was. Is that still ongoing, or is that going to be a later date?
He'll be at the November, or is he slated to be at the November meeting? He has sent an email. I think the planning commission wants to, similar to Hollywood Peg, say goodbye. Mr. Meek has been on the planning commission for many, many years. So I think they'll do that. And then that'll be at your November 19th meeting for a more formal accepting his retirement.
Could we potentially appoint Keith then in November?
You could certainly set that up. I don't think there's any rule against that.
No, as soon as his retirement's effective, they can move people around.
Yes, the attending December. Okay, but
So he wants to resign as of January 1st.
Yeah.
So you could appoint someone starting.
Yes.
Yeah, you can appoint someone early beginning in the first month of the year.
There you go, maybe in November we can do that.
Got it. Thank you.
That's the only person. Anyone else want to speak? Nobody else signed up? Okay, then I guess we'll jump over to budget.
what I would ask the board to do in your books is go to the fire tab. You had asked me to revise the fire department budget. I'm gonna switch to the other microphone. It's gonna be a little easier for me. My previous version of the proposed 2025 fire budget was to put it in, briefly lean, considering some of the issues that we discussed, that the board and I discussed. So this budget is more realistic, and you can see in the upper left-hand corner, it proposes a millage increase of 0.9 mils. And most of that, of course, is related to personnel costs, such as wages and benefits related to the firefighters. There is also, to address a question by Mr. Donnell, if you look down towards the bottom section, the second line under where it says services fire fund, the computers, I received some clarification of what the 2024 costs were. $13,000 of that was new software called First Due, which is substituting for current software. We're going to phase out current software. And in 2025, the county is mandating tablets similar, very similar to what the police department has in the police cars. Essentially, they're MCTs for fire trucks and fire equipment. And some of that cost has increased that line item. Even tablets are that funny hybrid between a computer and a phone type device, but we've been putting them under computers because they're used more like a computer than they are phone.
How many trucks get these MCT?
7, the 2 tankers, the 2 engines, and the aerial. And then the rescue and the Jeep will not have it.
Does the Chief vehicle also get one?
Yes, I was just going to say, I left that out, the command vehicles. I apologize.
Would that become 8 then?
So I guess not the tower, it would be the command vehicle that would have it, yeah. And there are some, so the tablets themselves cost around $1,000, and then they have to mount, just like police MCTs have certain mounting equipment, they have to have all that specialized mounting equipment, and which boosts that cost up to around $11,000. I don't, if what I determined in going through the budget is that we need, I believe, approximately $400,000 of carryover at the end of 2025, and that's where the millage rate comes from. Is with the increased, more realistic costs, then looking at what the carryover would be, this is the millage that would be required.
Just for the folks in the audience, this got discussed at our last budget meeting. It's a pretty significant increase we're talking about here. What this is a result of some model change. Previously, there was a lot of volunteers at the fire, for our fire force. We're not getting those volunteers anymore, frankly. So we've had to change our model to one where we're hiring fire folks. Not cheap to hire folks. Those folks are all rolling out of the academy. They're going to come in during 2025 for the first time. We're paying their full salaries. So that's what this increase really is the result of. Frankly, it was, if we didn't do this, you wouldn't be seeing 24/7 fire coverage, which I don't think anybody wants that.
I don't have any more comments on the fire budget. And certainly if the board thinks of any questions between meetings, please let me know. if you wish to move on, I do not have all of the general fund this evening. The general fund consists of 5 departments. Administration, buildings and grounds, police, highway, and recreation. I have 2 of them here. I'll just quickly, unless Bob would prefer doing it, go over buildings and grounds. Essentially, I want to point out 2 things. One, in regard to buildings and grounds utilities, that line item, which is about halfway down the page, that also includes the propane that we get for the generator. Now we're on natural gas now, so we do not have experience with going through a winter now on natural gas. So that it's very possible that I've actually overestimated. Another issue that we do not have any long-term experience with is the fact that the campus is now on public water. And you know, we've only gotten 1 quarter's worth of bills from Shillington Authority. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the utilities line item as time goes on. Historically, our utilities line item over the years has gradually decreased as we've switched from incandescent technology to LED technology, as we've gotten more efficient HVAC units in the building, as we replaced the roof of the building. That helped a lot. And now we're on UGI, and now we're on public water. So this line item may actually be a very interesting story over time. The other thing to point out to you is that there was a project under the maintenance and repairs line item that we did not get accomplished in 2024, and that is replacing the fire alarm system in this building. I did not budget for that in 2025 because we do not have an accurate quote for that line item. So I just wanted to explain that. And with these changes and with you can also see under the water purity line item, that was the line item for when we were on well water in this building. When you're on well water in a public building, it still has to get tested. All of those things that a water company has, we were a water company, essentially. All of that testing goes away now that we're on public water. So that line item has decreased tremendously over time. So overall, there's a decrease in the buildings and grounds budget. And Bob, I don't know if you had any other comments.
We were technically 4 water companies. But each building had its own different setup. Hopefully we'll see some economy with the new heat in the evidence training building. But I don't have any other comments about it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a guessing game until we see how these various changes and efficiencies in the utilities really pan out in terms of cost.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Drew.
I have 2 questions. Line item 4090161, building and grounds, social security, medical contribution. We spent almost $6,000 this year and there's nothing budgeted for next year.
Yeah, that is clearly an error and the cell didn't populate, and I will fix that. It will probably be a similar number, but I will fix that. Thank you, Ruth.
And then the 4090300. Contracted services, I thought that was like the mowing and everything. But we spent almost $55,000 this year, and we're only budgeting $10,000 next year.
There are, we can certainly take more of a look at that, but it will not be the same kind of price. There have been a lot of changes in the various maintenance contracts. And I agree with you, that should get another look, but, it won't, it's unlikely to be as high as some previous year.
Well, where is the mowing contract? Is that in there or somewhere else?
No, it would, you are correct, it would be, but right now, there's very little mowing occurring on this campus.
Correct.
Yeah,
The grass isn't.
yes, there's no mowing, necessary, certainly at Poplar Neck. There, across the street, we're allowing the wetland to be a wetland for the most part. So there's a lot less mowing that's occurring. I agree with you. I need to look at that line item more carefully, and probably increase it somewhat, but I don't think it's going to be the same, expense as this year.
Okay, because in the fourth quarter, we spent 10,000. It kind of looks like that's what carried over.
Yeah, again, I will take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other department tonight, and you're gonna be tag teamed on this one, is the police department. And so there may be a bit of bouncing back and forth between Chief Winchester and myself. And I'll let him start. Yeah.
It's gonna be like a tennis match. We're gonna be going.
Yeah,
So you should have the,
bless you.
PD budget, for the general, it's a blue tax, it's really. Just starting from the top and just kind of pointing out some obvious, and if there's any questions, please let us know and we'll, try to address them. You do see notes in the side, for points that we want to make, that Gene put in. The first note is for prior year sick reimbursement. That's a one-time payment, that's for, that number, moves, it's a moving target. It will be adjusted, and that's, for the sick time that the officers do not utilize, that causes that number to go up and down and adjusted, variously.
The number in here right now is the maximum it could be.
Yes, it'll only go down. One thing I'd like to point out is the wages. Obviously, the wage difference between the budget year 2024 and the proposed budget 2025, that's based on contractual obligations. And I do have some, I no means any kind of mathematician or numbers man, but it'll kind of make sense at the end when I say a few words about the costs associated with the wages that are contractual, that are basically beyond our control, as well as the healthcare, health insurance, which, as you can see, is a 19% increase. So those are costs that are fairly beyond, or entirely beyond our control. And when you look at the difference in overall budgets between the proposed 2025 and the budgeted 2024, you're looking at, when you consider those costs that are out of our control, an overall slight increase of just about $100,000 from 2024 budget to 2025. So keep that in mind when we're going through this. You know, as far as my budget with the PD, the overwhelming majority and the great percentage of my budget are personnel costs. So just speaking with my counterparts in other departments, that 19% increase in healthcare, I think a lot of departments our townships, boroughs are observing this and seeing this, and it's causing obviously some concern. It's some indigestion, but that 19% increase is a tough pill to swallow. Overtime wages, currently, what I'd like to point out about that is that we do get reimbursed for a large portion of overtime details that we run through the Highway Traffic Safety Network. And I did receive the numbers from Peg, and that number is about $20,000 that we have been reimbursed. That money does not go back into that line item. That's why you don't see that. And it appears that we overspent that overtime line item, however, we did not. I'm requesting that we don't lower that line item because, as you know, when unexpected incidents occur, whether it's crimes or whether it's uncontrolled absences, we do have to fill those shifts. And also events that occur throughout the township, in the township, that we want to staff, i.e. Community days, we want to make sure it's a successful operation and everyone's safe. That does expend overtime. We do change shifts and switch our shifts to the degree that we can, but there's always an overtime cost associated with that.
Just to give the board an example, on October 3rd, the township received $15,600 in overtime reimbursement, but it has to be deposited into a revenue line item. It can't be deposited against this payroll line item, because then it would mess up when W-2s are printed, et cetera. And when the auditor does tests to make sure that we're paying people correctly. So that is something to keep in mind. Chief, did you also want to address tuition for the academy in the same vein?
Yes, so another area that we receive a substantial amount of reimbursement is through the Municipal Police Officers Training Association, MOPAC, which when we send an officer to the academy, a certain portion, a certain percentage of that employee's wages as well as tuition for the academy is reimbursed to us. So every year when we do send somebody to the police academy, upon graduation, we can only submit for reimbursement upon graduation. And Krista Crane submits the day that she's able to do so. Just to give you an idea of what percentage that is, we had 2 officers that attended the academy, that graduated the academy, that we were reimbursed for. And I believe that reimbursement totals were, at $12,000 and change, that we do receive that. If that reimbursement is received the same year, that is placed into our training line item, which is under services 4100-241, which is why you see that we actually have more money in that line item right now than originally budgeted. That's where that money is deposited. We do have one officer who's currently in the academy and she's slated to graduate in December. However, although Krista submits for reimbursement the day of, more than likely we won't receive that reimbursement until the next year, 2025. And then that money is therefore goes into prior year expenses, which I describe that as the cloud. That means all it's not. But anyway, I don't see that. So that just kind of answers that question. Those are the big reimbursements that we do get and we will continue to participate in. It's not a guarantee. It's only a guarantee that if the state is reimbursing when they enter the academy, that they will reimburse for that individual. However, at any time, they can come back and say that they're going to stop that, which they did for a period a few years ago. They stopped reimbursing for salary and tuition, but now they're doing it again. So let's hope it continues.
Fast, before we move on line 4100-360, part and loan. I see for 24, we actually budgeted 0, and as of September, we spent $24,190.80. And I see that for next year, we have 0 again.
Correct. So, and Gina and Peg might be better explain this, but hard and long with, especially when police and COVID, the rules change and laws were passed that when an officer is on for COVID leave, that immediately puts them into heart and lung category. Can you better explain why? Is it impossible to project? I would imagine it's absolutely possible to project.
It is impossible to project. We can put a number in there. I can't guarantee you that it has any basis in reality. It depends on whether somebody receives an injury or whether they have COVID Now, and Mr. Miller, you might recall that at the Pennsylvania Municipal League Training Conference, it was stated that legislation was on the table this year to remove or rescind the statute about police are automatically granted heart and lung when they are positive for COVID, but that legislation didn't pass. It's anticipated it will be on the table again with the new legislative session. So that is a statute that the board might be interested in when you receive those legislative updates. Otherwise, it's when somebody's injured. Again, this is one of those line items. If the board would like us to populate it with something, we certainly can do that, but it's very unpredictable.
Yeah, I just said that because in 22 was $99,000.
Yes.
In 22, that was pretty much the height of COVID. Every officer that was off. That was on
Can I
COVID.
explain how that works? The heart and lung, because it doesn't go
Do you
on.
mind going on the line?
Sure. Okay, let me explain how heart and lung works. When we have to pay it, when we pay the doctors. With heart and lung, the line items that are used for wages have to only be used for wages. When the auditors come in here, every line item that says wages, overtime, they better add up 100% to what's on the W-2s. When heart and lung people get paid, there's different stipulations. They are not run on a payroll check. It is run different and separately. They cannot be put on a payroll check with taxes and all those things. It's run separately and we use that line item. So it's not coming out of his wage line item where you already put that money in. That's why it's never been budgeted. It's always been shown as a zero because you're not paying them out of the wage line item where you normally would be. They should be offsetting each other. So that's how that works. That way it never gets complicated. Their wages, when they're on heart and lung, never end up in their W-2 like they're not supposed to be on their W-2. And it makes everything really, really clean for the audit. That's why it's set up that way. Does anyone have any questions?
So essentially, if an officer is on heart and lung, say $24,000,
Correct.
their payroll for that year is short,
It's right,
less $24,000.
right. He would have, it wouldn't be pulled from the payroll line item. It's as simple as that, but you're still accommodating something. You're still showing that they're going to get something. But it's just, you show zero, so when the auditors come in, you have a heart and lung line item, that person still got paid. You can prove that they got paid, however, they cannot be part of the payroll.
And they don't,
It does not show up on their W-2 at all.
right? And they don't have taxes removed
Correct.
or anything like that.
Correct. So that's how that works, and that's why historically we always budget zero for heart and lung. So, any questions or concerns about that? It's really important, it's really, really important to understand that all of the line items across all the budgets that have anything to do with wages, strictly and only have wages pulled out of there. The auditors will come in and they will physically look at every one of those line items, say, have anything to do with wages, and they best total up to what our total gross payroll was. That's how they audit us, so really, really important that you know that, and that's why Heartland is done the way it is and why we budget zero. Any questions or concerns?
Just a clarification for me, what is MMO, and there's a U and a 9.
Okay, MMO is your minimum municipal obligation for your pensions.
Thank you.
And NU is for non-uniformed employees, would be anybody who is basically not a police officer. So, the uniform, the U would be, for the police department. Now, who knows what'll happen when you get, have a third, unit. So I don't know if something will change or not, but perfectly that's gonna happen.
Right now, the firefighters are not, and the police are an Act 600 pension. It's a different type of pension plan. There's a state law, Act 600, that governs it. The non-uniform pension plan is not an Act 600 plan. Right now, the firefighters are under the non-uniformed plan. I do not know if being an Act 600 pension plan is part of what they would be asking for. I totally do not know. Because we haven't had any formal negotiations yet.
A quick question, just curious. The budget year 2024 line for the wages. 132. Versus total, it's about $225,000 discrepancy. Not suggesting anything's wrong, but we just sort of talk to what some of that increase is.
So we have steps within the PD. So anytime a senior officer or an officer with great amount of experience or any kind of rank would leave, and they're replaced, usually is going to be a pay difference. Throughout the year, various officers have step increases. So when we budget for wages, we could take the approach that we're going to budget at the top rate for everybody that's going to make that rate, and any anticipated hires. But that's very difficult, if not impossible to do. So that's usually what the discrepancies are. And it also could be for the MMO payment I'm sorry, the heart and lung payments that just they've described. That's where these differences and variations.
Thank you.
Just touch it, and again, if there's any questions, just please shout them out. I would like to point out under 4,100 under materials and services, 4,100, 238 for uniforms. So we did increase that line item last year to accommodate the new hires that we did have. And we, as you can see, spent almost every penny of that. Also with overall replacement of uniforms and equipment on a regular basis that occurs, I believe that this next year, since our staffing is at optimal levels, I don't anticipate having to upfit officers from scratch, which is where a great deal of an expense can occur. So I propose that that budget be cut by about $12,000. So again, overall, on a $7+ million budget, it doesn't mean a lot, but shows that we're trying. The animal control services, you can see that there's a zero in there for this year's budget proposal. And there's a reason for that. As you know, we currently are contracted to Safety Net Sanctuary Animal Control. We were notified via their attorney, as every other municipality that contracts with them was, that they're going to be increasing their rate and moving towards a per capita expense model and of $1.50 per capita, which this year we contracted with them for $10,000. I think if they went to $1.50, Gene, that would be 23,000 and change.
Yes, it's $1.50 times 15,619 residents.
So looking at the numbers on the amount of times in the services that we required, to date, we have transported 5 dogs to their facility. So essentially, we paid $10,000 for 5 dogs this year. Looking at that number, 23,000 and change, kind of made me sick in my stomach to think that we would pay that amount of money if we were consistent with the services that we needed. Those services required the housing of the animal. We transported the animal, we captured the animal, we did all of that. So for the general public, we're mandated by law to respond and take custody of any stray dog that is called in, essentially. It puts a great deal of stress on police departments because, again, we're asked to do something that is probably not within our wheelhouse, but no one else really can do it, so they give it to us. There are state game commission, or dog control animals, individuals, but they're run through the state and like a state dog warden, and there's one warden for about 3 counties. So that really doesn't help us. And they're very useful when they are available. However, they're just not available. They have an overwhelming amount of work. I started contacting various organizations that may be able to provide us with animal control services, or at least provide us with the service that we require, which is basically minimal service. I did reach out to an organization. I am in communication with this organization, and it seems very promising. This organization did express an interest to enter into an agreement with us, and they are currently working on numbers to determine what the amount would be, but it was indicated to me that the amount would be somewhat like an a la carte per dog service, and if it was not, and it would be a set rate, that rate would come under $10,000. So I think that's very promising, and that's the reason why there's a zero there. I will continue with my communication. I should get something within the next couple of days, a proposal, if you will. And once I do, my plan was to immediately, obviously, get Jean on board and update her, and then also schedule either a conference call or a meeting with the commissioner liaisons, so we can better prepare that number in the current 2025 budget.
I have a curious question. Ammunition, guessing, or is most of that like range training qualification kind of stuff? I just see, the reason I asked, we have 25-ish a year, looks like going back last several years, and I'm guessing that's just a recurring cost that we keep consuming a similar amount of ammunition.
Yes, I will kind of clarify. It has nothing to do with animal control. So, yes, that the ammunition and similar supplies has everything to do with our weapon systems. When it comes to rifles, the handguns, and the majority of that are ammunition runs that we do. We like to do one ammunition run a year. And when I say I'm not really a gun guy like Bob is, but I know he's quite impressed sometimes when we do our ammunition run. Although it doesn't look like a lot, when you come back with a bill of 15,000, you're expected to see a room full of ammunition and it's just a pallet. And you're like, oh my gosh, it didn't really buy that much, but that's the majority of that is ammunition. We do an incredible amount of training, which is required, that's necessary. The amount of training we do is beyond what is required through the state. But it's necessary, in my opinion, to remain proficient in firearms. We did just transition to our red dot system on our handguns, which required additional training because it's a different trigger and sight acquisition. Yeah. So it's essential that we continue to maintain that amount in that line item for the supplies. A few years ago, when we were experiencing supply chain issues, there were departments that did reach out. We were in communication with each other because there were some departments that were in alert that they were going to be running out of ammunition. And if we were able to assist, we would, and we did. But as you know, most people may know that various training requires different ammunition. So the ammunition that we train and shoot on isn't necessarily our duty ammo. So we do try and purchase a less expensive, if you will, rounds for training, and then reserve the higher end for our duty ammo. Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll just keep kind of bouncing down, then we can always bounce back. We talked about the training and that anomaly of more money in the budget this year than what we had originally budgeted for. The supplies to protect persons and properties. I will point out that that line item is fairly robust. We purchase the majority of that line item goes towards ballistic vests, helmets, shields, and items that are utilized by the department to essentially protect ourselves. So it goes far beyond just rubber gloves and CPR masks or anything like that. As most of these line items, we budget according to spending for the previous 3 years. It's usually what I look at. So I'm looking at maintaining that, slightly increasing that line item, but maintaining that line item at $30,000.
Chief, can you talk about the shield?
Oh, yes, I can. So one of the things that we have to purchase, we do have a few different ballistic shields. When I say a few, we have one ballistic shield that we use when we take out and we have on the street at all times. And we have another ballistic shield that we keep in the station because it's fairly bulky, but it's required if we would run into an active shooter incident. We are in need of a new ballistic shield. The ballistic shield that we do have is about 13 to 15 years old. It does maintain its integrity, ballistic integrity. However, we start to get concerned because it is in the trunk often, and it does report out to various locations and incidents. That ballistic shield is going to run upwards of $9,000. We did receive a price quote, and we do plan on purchasing that through this line item. We received 2 quotes, basically, one for a less ballistic integrity shield, which would stop a firearm round, and that was about $2,000. But the shield that we're going to purchase will actually stop a rifle round, which is pretty much the reason why you get these anyway. So that's why we ended up choosing the shield that would stop a rifle round. As opposed to just a regular handgun. The other line item that I just wanted to kind of point out and talk about is the 4100-250. That's the maintenance repair office equipment. That is the line item that we utilize when we are replacing any equipment in the office, but most importantly, our maintenance of our printers. So when technology advances, and although we have minimized our paper usage, if you will, through reports and through citations, we still use copier machines, scanners, and our fax machines, a tremendous amount, actually. And that is where we take that out of that line item, all the maintenance and costs associated with our copiers. We are in communication with the company that does provide us with for copiers. Peg's always talking with them to try and make the operations more efficient so that we're not getting dinged, if you will, on having too many copies, basically. So it's a fairly large line item, and it kind of sticks out in my opinion, but that's important, and that's again based on previous years' spending.
Two line items I'd like to point out are the last 2 on this page, the auto insurance and the law enforcement liability insurance. Mrs. Carpenter received information from just to set the table. The insurance year for Cumru Township for auto, workers' comp, liability, umbrella, pretty much everything except flood insurance, starts April 13th to the next April 13th. Unfortunately, at budget time, we're asking the insurance agent for assistance in budgeting for something that we won't even be thinking about for another 6 months. Peggy did get information from the insurance agent for all the various line items. And this sometimes happened. I do remember speaking with Mrs. O'Leary specifically about this in prior years. You can see the auto insurance reduced significantly. That estimate of $14,019 is from the insurance agent, and the law enforcement liability increased. So they kind of flip-flop, and this happens quite a bit when you switch carriers. For some of our liability insurance, we're on a different carrier now. Sedgwick, I think is the name of the carrier. And insurance companies package things differently and come up with different pricing. So I just wanted to point that out because it looks rather strange. But that is the information we received.
If you did, commissioners will move down to, I think it might be the next page, I'm not sure exactly how, it's gonna be 4100, 353. It's right above capital. Just wanted to talk a little bit about those line items. The line items that stand out, at least to me, I'm sure that stand out to you as well, is going to be 4100, 500, 4100, 510. That's going to be the computers, hardware, and accessories, and computer software licenses and agreements. The line item is fairly explicit on, self-explanatory on what it is. As far as hardware, basically what I'm indicating with that is workstations within the PD. So our officers require a tremendous amount of technology to do their jobs, and it's only increasing. As far as hardware and workstations, when I say workstation, I mean a computer and a monitor. You're looking at all kinds of hardware that is also within the vehicles. The MCTs are in a different fund through the county. However, the in-car printers, in-car scanners, the calibration, the speed timing devices are all different types of hardware that we pull from this line item. One of the things that we just recently ran into was the replacement of our detectives' computers. Again, I'm not a technical individual. I'm probably going to make mistakes on language and lingo and sound ridiculous to someone who knows what they're talking about, but I'll try to clarify if there's any questions. So when we replaced the workstations for the detectives, we looked into how much RAM they would need in order to accomplish and run the programs that they were going to be running. One of the programs that they do run and operate on these computers is a tremendous amount of cell phone data and information that they receive when they do file search warrants with various telephone and cell phone companies. Once we did receive that, the computers, the desktops, they were set up, and it was determined that we needed additional RAM. We looked at that and we came up with a solution to buy external RAM, which was much more cost effective and efficient than buying brand new workstations, which wouldn't have been in the world because we could have transferred those workstations to the officers in the squad room. However, we didn't want to do that. We specifically bought these workstations for the detectives because it was a higher grade program. So with that in mind, it's just an explanation of some of the things that we do purchase in this line item. Our detectives, with this additional RAM, it was a solution. However, I don't believe it's a long-term solution. So one of the things that we were bouncing around was getting a standalone, if you will, workstation that would not be assigned to an individual detective, but would be assigned to the detective unit, so that when they did run these programs and needed this massive amount of RAM space, that they could go to that standalone computer. So we would essentially, in my terms, have one beefed up computer that would be able to really support everything that they need to do on these computers. Again, this is where that would come out of, this hardware as an accessory. I'm recommending, based on past year spending, that we increase that line item from 25,000 in the current budget to 30,000.
You also have other workstation stuff to do, correct? You
Correct.
You have a rotation of the patrol units.
Yes.
Workstation.
We have a rotation, so, and we're also increasing the workspaces in the squad room. So I've been working with Public Works, Bob and Mike, in maximizing that space and putting 2 workstations per desk, which we are in the process of doing, which will require an additional 4 workstations to be purchased. And that's including our regular rotation that we go through. So we will have 10 workstations in the squad room. And then we also have 5 sergeant workstations. And then when you're considering the systems analyst, myself, the lieutenants, the detectives, it seems somewhat overwhelming for someone that doesn't know computers like me. But we are very technology and hardware reliant now. That's just the way of policing. It goes a long way to, when I first came on, I would try and return my patrol vehicle to my sergeant because it had a computer in it and I didn't want a computer in my car. So now guys come back in if the computer's not working and say, I need another car because my computer's not working. It's really flipped. And I know, and I apologize that I talked so much so far, but especially on this hardware. Software is the exact same thing, and as you can see, that line item actually is beefier, if you will, than the hardware. Every piece of technology that we utilize comes with software and a maintenance agreement, if you will. A few of the things that we will incur that will be additional software and accessories this coming years. The big one's going to be our body worn cameras. Although the district attorney is going to be purchasing the first year and paying for that first year agreement, one of the things that we do have to account for is any kind of an accessory that comes after the fact, or any increases in software associated with all the current hardware that we do have. That does increase incrementally through the years, as does everything else. We get new agreements, we sign new agreements. Just for an example, our Cody track interface is $1,700 annually. The Cody, which is our reporting system, support and maintenance is upwards of $19,000 a year. So these are very expensive items that if we do not at least contract with the support, if something were to occur, and we don't have that support agreement, that software agreement, we're kind of left with a very expensive piece of equipment that we can't utilize. Another piece of technology that comes out of that software is our, I'm sure you've heard me talk about the license plate readers, but the new Viper system, which enables us to be integrated throughout the county with other police departments, and have real-time data on and from cameras in various jurisdictions, basically which are plate readers. We did have a stolen vehicle just today that we were able to, one, determine was in fact a real stolen vehicle, and we could track that all the way into Pottstown. So if they work, they're there, but that's at a cost, but not at an incredible cost. Moving on, one of the things that are included in that is the speed board. So with the speed board, I did get a price quote for that. It's like I talked about before, and commissioners and now had asked about that, the effectiveness and how they're utilized. And I described it as an invaluable piece of equipment, which it really is. I'm asking that we could, if we could purchase a speed board for next year, and that would go under where the board would like, basically. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We can put that under purchase of equipment and supplies, or if the board desires or wants to put that under capital, it can be placed under capital. It is, the price came in, price quote at $7,200. That will be the mid-sized board that will be able to provide us with real-time data, as well as being able to track the data through our software. That being said, if we are approved to purchase a speed board, it will add to the software line item. Not incredibly, but moving forward, it's usually at a software maintenance cost of a support cost of around $1,500 to $2,000 a year. So I guess I'm looking a little bit to the board for guidance on one, if we should entertain the purchase of a new speed board for next year, and two, if that's the case, where would the board like me to put that, under purchase of equipment and supplies or capital? And if you're looking for a recommendation from me, my suggestion would be under the purchase of equipment and supplies, which would be 4,174.
I think you were authorized last meeting to order it. But yeah, I would agree with the chief's recommendation just to take it out of equipment and supplies. It's under $10,000.
The other notes that just are on the side, I'll just quick touch on them. The community outreach and prevention line item, although it's not an incredible amount, it's in my opinion essential because it allows us to provide that money goes back to the community. It's basically what it does. All of it goes back to the community. We like to purchase and have on hand various gifts and giveaways for kids that come in. We had a young man that came on campus the other day and was watching the crane on the fire station. He had his mom drive him over just so he could see the big crane, and it's pretty cool. I found myself and caught Gene a couple times staring at it, but it's kind of fascinating.
I've taken about 1 million pictures of it.
Yeah, we're able to bring him in and sway him away from construction into the PD world and give him a lot of giveaways. But the Fish Journey, National Night Out, as well as hopefully continue Trunk and Treat, that's where that stuff comes from, to include the food, and it's not donated in drinks, it's not donated in food.
But geez, I think that's $4,500 well spent. So no issue taking there. I think my only question would be, do you see opportunities to increase community outreach and those sorts of things? And I guess where my head is at, I say the more, and maybe stating the obvious, that the more we can interface with the community, the easier it is for you to do your job and more trust and rapport, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I do see the opportunity in the future to increase our visibility and interaction with the public. I think we were at a really good level in the past. We had a lot of events, and then when the world stopped with COVID, everything kind of got reeled back in. We're starting to get back into that groove of these events, and people are starting to come out. I agree. One of the things that is not included in this plan, but in the same kind of lens as what you're talking about, is our therapy dog. And getting Ollie out there. He's an incredible hit at these events, but not only is he valuable in therapy and traumatic incidents, he's just as valuable at community interaction and community policing. So I do see the opportunity to increase these interactions in the future.
Also, don't forget community days. There's 2 solid weeks of community interaction.
To say, I was about to pickpocket one of your officers for the handcuffs to keep my daughter away from the dog. She was having her kind of not constantly running over.
My favorite line with kids is oftentimes when they see Ollie out unexpectedly, they'll say, "Oh, he goes to my school," because Officer Heatley brings him to the schools all the time, which is really great.
Just moving quickly into capital. So for capital, the board in the past years has done the PD a solid in really dedicating and trying to keep our fleet updated. We don't historically, it's tough to realize the benefits aside from a happy police chief saying, "Thank you, we have nice cars that we're driving and officers are driving around." But Bob's men, they're the ones that keep the cars on the street running. As he'll tell you, it's a daily occurrence to get an email from my officers about a vehicle issue, whether it's like last night, a flat tire on one of the vehicles on the line, And just putting a plug in for his department, if it wasn't for his department, our vehicles, our cops will be walking to where they need to go. Because even with current updated vehicles, issues happen, issues occur, whether it's, you know, the check engine lights or flat tires or things like that, a rattle, an odor, you name it, my officers find it. That being said, squeaky brakes, it's a big one. That being said, just talking with Bob about, which I work closely with him when it comes to our fleet and fleet management. It's my recommendation that we can go from the history of 2 vehicles purchased for the line, the fleet line, what I call the fleet line, 2 marked vehicles down to 1 for 2025. I think that will be totally fine. As you know, we did just have to total a car, and we do have a car on order. So essentially, we're going to have 2 new vehicles in 2025. I think this is the perfect opportunity to recommend only purchasing in 2025 1 fleet vehicle, 1 marked unit. The vehicles, of course, have increased as everyone knows, and everything else has increased. And that $60,000 that I'm recommending for a vehicle does include total upfit of that vehicle, decaling, paint, and upfitting, and anything that we can use from vehicle that we put out of service or spot puts in mothball. We do strip the vehicles and we reuse them. As you know, similar to everything else, every year, every other year, car dealers slightly modify the vehicle just enough so, say for example, our interior cages don't fit into the new vehicles. I think in 2025, we're gonna run into that, where we're gonna probably have to get a new cage for the interior vehicle. We won't be able to reuse the cage. Hopefully we can reuse things like the light bars and sirens. These are usually interchangeable. But I'm asking the board to consider a capital purchase of $60,000 for a new marked police vehicle.
Chief, do we keep an asset replacement schedule, or we just simply 2 new vehicles every year? Is that kind of what we've been doing?
No, so what we've been doing is every Monday, Bob's mechanics come out and they check the mileage on every single vehicle, including my own. So there's a fleet management plan in place, if you will, that we look at what vehicles are coming to the end of their useful life. And that's also taking into consideration any kind of rust or anything like operational wise that we've identified. What we came to was the last, I'd say, probably 5 years, 2 vehicles. We would purchase 2 vehicles, a brother and a sister vehicle, and that's the replacement plan that we were operating under. We have gotten to the point in the last couple of years that we were able to put 1 or 2 vehicles off on reserve because the vehicles are always going down. And we sold off the vehicles through auction that really serve no legitimate purpose to put them in reserve. So now we're in a position where Bob's recommending, correct me if I'm wrong, that if we purchase a new vehicle, put that on the fleet line, we remove 1 vehicle and we will put that in reserve. And we'll also try and look at auctioning off our utility vehicle, which is an Expedition, which is about 15 years old.
The 08, I think. And one of the issues we have also now with all vehicles is delivery time. Delivery time from the dealer, delivery time then from the upfitter, everything just takes so long. The other thing with police cars is not always about the mileage, it's about the idle time. Every hour of idle time is about equal to 25 miles of travel of the odometer, and that's a recommendation from the manufacturer. So yeah, we try to keep things around, and our mechanics are really good at stripping off because every part that we can move to the next vehicle.
How large is our fleet?
I think currently right now we have 10 vehicles in the fleet line. I think it's 10. 10 vehicles in the fleet. One of the good things about the MCTs that we can do that fire can't do is our MCTs are interchangeable. So if a vehicle does go down, we will remove the MCT and place that into a reservist vehicle. So with an increased fleet, obviously, not only the increased cost to purchase a vehicle, but it's the increased cost to maintain the hardware that's within that vehicle. So we've cut that down. So the vehicles that are in reserve don't necessarily require, if you will, or don't have an MCT and all that other hardware equipment in that vehicle still. We'll reuse that equipment. It's basically a temporary vehicle. But I believe it's what we have right now is 12. When I talk about the fleet, I'm talking about just patrol marked units, marked vehicles.
So we're cycling about every 5-ish years, basically.
Yeah, that's about it, right? Yes, yeah. And as Bob kind of indicated, even with the idle time, they are run close to 24 hours a day. Not exactly 24 hours a day, but close to 24 hours. As Gene can tell you, Bob can tell you, and if you've ever come on an overlap day, that line is empty. There's no vehicles on the line and they're all gone. There might be another day where we have 4 people working for that shift. And you look out and there's going to be 6 vehicles on the line. If you're not aware, it could be like, why do they have so many vehicles? But we definitely have a number of vehicles that are appropriate parked.
I'm just curious, please tell me if you think this is an idiotic thing to ask. Won't take offense. Things like the speed board. I'm wondering, are there ways that you think maybe we could gain more efficiency, like perhaps have 1 less vehicle if we had 3 more speed boards to be able to like more efficiently allocate our officers to areas of need. Is that something?
I kind of get and understand what you're saying. It's difficult to answer that. I think that as far as efficiency, I'm big on hotspot policing, putting cops where they need to be. Along the same lines is what I call, and it's considered in the industry, problem-oriented policing. It's policing smarter. So we tell the officers that they need to relay to the individuals in the general public if they're concerned because they haven't seen a cop, say, for example, in 5 hours or 6 hours, or I never see a cop. Well, first of all, we always tell them that's a good thing, because that means there's not really a lot of problems in there. Rest assured, if you do call us, that we'll be there. So I don't believe that to answer your question, I don't believe that we could become any more efficient to minimize the fleet. But I absolutely understand what you're thinking, the lines of what you're thinking. One of the problems with the industry of policing itself is that, we're out and about, we're doing our job, but we're essentially waiting, if you will, for that big thing to happen. So, you can never tell who's gonna call, when they're gonna call, and where it's gonna call. We did have, and I'll just make a side note, there is predictive analytics and policing out there, and it's debatable whether it works. I have my own opinion. I was involved with that predictive policing, but basically what it does is there's programs and softwares that will plug in all these algorithms and analytics, and it will predict where a crime is going to occur. And essentially, you get that information and you put a cop where they say a crime is going to occur. My opinion is the flaw in that is when you put a cop there and a crime doesn't occur, how do we know that it's because the cop was there? So it's tough to quantitate if it's effective or not. But along those same lines, and I'm drifting off and I apologize, it's kind of like that. It's so unpredictable that if we were to eliminate vehicles, which would prevent officers from getting out there, we'd probably be in a bind.
There's also another 4-letter word in relation to vehicles, DEER. And unfortunately, I'm sure everybody here knows that there's a lot of those 4-letter words running around. I see actually a herd of them every time I leave the building in the evening. So it's unfortunate. There's usually at least one of those incidents every fall.
And just quickly to point out in the Capitol, as you can see, with our body worn cameras that we're going to be implementing, the district attorney has agreed to pay for the full first year of that, which is essentially, all the hardware associated with the, body worn cameras. So that cost of $37,918, we will have to consider, obviously, budgeting that, for the 2026 budget, because that will be an ongoing cost. It's a 5-year agreement, so 4 complete years of that cost. But as you know, and I explained to you in the past, what comes to that is also an upgrade, a complete upgrade in all the body worn cameras through accident, so. And if there's any questions I can try and address, or even I can answer, I don't wanna sit up here and talk too much, and I was probably getting sick of listening. Bob said he finds it riveting.
I don't have any other departments of the general fund for this evening. We do have a budget meeting scheduled for November 7th. That's under the reminders. At 6 o'clock, and I anticipate having the rest of the general fund at that time.
If nothing else, then I guess we're going to an executive session.
Thank you. In case the public leaves, one thing I want to note for the public is that on election day, the administrative offices upstairs will be closed to the public. We are already receiving a number of individuals coming into the office, assuming that we can assist them with early voting and things like that. And we cannot answer any of those questions. And obviously they are referred to election services. So on election day, the office upstairs will be closed to the public. The police department is still open for business.
Yes, you can always come in. I wanna make, yeah, we're not close, so you can always come in.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll come back. I'll throw it over to Kelsey to wrap up the executive session.
Okay, for the minutes, we did hold an executive session to discuss a collective bargaining issue with respect to the police, a collective bargaining issue with respect to fire, and 2 personnel issues. And as a result, I am looking for 2 motions. The first would be to grant a 3-month extension to the employee discussed in executive session for his FMLA status.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
No, Mr. Bill Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Backdoor.
Yes.
Mr. Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes.
And the second motion I'm looking for is a motion to authorize the solicitor to revise the memorandum of understanding with the police in order to implement Act 49 into that MOU.
So.
Also,
Mr. Backdoor,
Yes.
Mr. Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Bill Miller,
yes.
Mr. Greg Miller.
Yes. Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second. I'll first.